We are live, so welcome everybody. This is SIG API Machinery for Kubernetes Open Source, our bi-weekly meeting. Today is December 10th of 2025, and I think this is going to be our last meeting of the year because the next one falls on December 24th. We are going to skip that one probably, so the next time we will meet together is January 7th. And we had a couple of skip meetings because of KubeCon and Thanksgiving in North America. So today, as a result of that, we have a packed agenda. So let's get to it right away. I will start with the first topic and hand it over to Christoph. If you want to do an introduction and tell us, how can we help?
So, hey, I'm Krzysztof. But you can say Christoph. It's not so easy to pronounce. I'm working at Red Hat. I took over this issue. It started as a SIG topic because it's about being able to delete undecryptable resources. But quite quickly, we identified that it's not so much auth, but so much more API machinery. The alpha implementation was done by Abu Kashim, the enhancement by Standa Rajnitska. And basically, now that we had the handover, I'm trying to figure out what are the better requirements. This is the biggest thing for me that I want to have out of this meeting ID to settle on some better requirements and also get reviews on the progress that are currently open. That are like there were some tests by Abu who are like open for a year or so, and I also added the dry run functionality to it. So there are some more topics to discuss. So when Abu worked on it, he realized there's kind of a cache. Well, he didn't realize it was done on purpose. So while implementing the alpha solution for this, it was not trivial to basically delete this object because it's most of the time it is encrypted and we can't decrypt it, so we don't have the old object at hand. So the solution that was chosen for alpha was basically to cause a cache reset. This happens on the server side for the specific resource. Basically, the watch cache gets reset, the connections get terminated. And because of that, it ripples down to it that the client side also starts resetting the caches, which is highly problematic for classes that have already kind of undecryptable resources. So it could be kind of the last thing to push it over the edge. But technically, you could say, hey, this is an edge case. The class is already not too healthy. If it dies, it was just the best effort. So we could keep it as is. Or we try to find another solution, and the solution would be that we take the information from the object that we have at hand and somehow encode it and pass it down. So the etcd tree watcher could basically add namespace and name to the arrow, or we could have some shallow delete event for that. And then we would instruct the reflector to, based on that data, transform, because currently what's happening is the etcd tree watcher, when it receives the delete event and it can't decrypt it. Sorry, I got a call from my dad. When it can't decrypt it, basically it creates a corrupt object deleted error, and this currently instructs the reflector to cause this cache reset. And we could tell the reflector, hey, this is basically the default key func that you can use to try to find that object and delete it. And hopefully, if we're using the default, if you use the default key func, it should be possible to delete this object from the watch cache. And from what I have seen is that we would then use the previous object if it's in the cache of the API server to propagate it and have maybe even a proper delete event being sent to the clients. But as I'm new to the Kube API server place, I'm not sure which if it's really necessary, which direction to go, and I'm still not having yet a complete picture about the flow. So this is why I don't have yet a detailed document, but I'm currently working on a detailed document, so I could append it to the topic. Also, before maybe some people have opinions, I don't know what is missing, right? So this is the unknown. So I heard that there are some discussions about the alpha implementation. So in case there are more things besides the dry run, the testing, and solution for the cache resets. And if there are more wishes, what we should do to push it to beta, I'm completely open. I just want to collect everything to be able to estimate how long it will take and give this information back to my employer.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so my question would be, how, like, for my understanding is that if you are unable to decrypt the object, you basically lost part of the history, which means until you, that if you detect that there is object deleted, you can, or it's unencrypted, you can delete it later, but you lost this part of history. So there is no way to restore watchers that were before this point. So it's basically everything before this deletion is lost. So I don't think there is any way you could restore and not drop watchers. I mean, after this point, you can accept watchers again, and you could maybe do something simpler to reconnect them, or encourage them to wait until the watch cache is restored. But you cannot serve history that you don't have complete history. That's the requirement for the thing, for like watch eventual strong consistency.
Okay, this is also points to another issue that I forgot to mention. The current implementation of the dry run allows you to delete exactly one object, which means that in the current implementation, we would go through the hassle a couple of times. So actually, I had the surprising experience to have such a thing in production, and usually there's more than one object that you need to delete. So this is also one thing that I forgot to mention.
Thanks for the update. So I'm catching up on this a little bit. Clearly the problem is real, right? We've got a situation where you want to be able to clear, like in the case where you just want to be able to delete stuff, that should be valid if you have the permissions to do it. That should be a relatively safe operation. Most watchers only need to know that the thing's been deleted. They don't really need to know the contents, but because of history, we've got a case where we provide that in the watch event, and now we can't, and so we can't reproduce the same watch events as before. Am I understanding that all right?
I hope so.
Okay. I do agree that like I don't see an obvious way out of that problem of like we can't reproduce the watch events that existed if you could decrypt. So I do understand that problem. Sorry, I only saw this a little bit earlier this morning. I haven't had a chance to read through it. I would like a little more time to make sure I fully thought through all the alternatives to this problem, and kind of like I saw the comments here about the idea of, you know, changing the way that we handle errors in the watch stream and stuff. It seems like a watch stream that could do this could be buildable, but it's mostly a backwards compatibility problem, which I haven't found a way to solve yet. But is that the main remaining gap?
So yes, if you would have kind of a custom shallow delete event, it would take ages to release it because of this Kubernetes N-3 thing. But if we would extend the error event, we could make it in a way that it works fine, and that we default to a cache reset for older clients. This should be doable, as most of the things are happening on the Kube API server side.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine if we could have like a watch client that opts in to be able to accept a new type of event that's just a deletion with no more information, because we could satisfy that, and that would at least make a watch client that is willing to tolerate that be able to avoid having to be completely shut down and restarted. So I kind of want to explore a couple ideas here.
This seems like an exceptional state that an admin is already having to take like sort of destructive actions for. It doesn't seem bad to me to make things watching that type drop and reestablish their watches.
Okay.
And there's all like when they relist, if once all of the things they were listing are decryptable and they can actually successfully relist, there's already an established like deleted final state unknown flow that those clients go through. That actually seems fine to me.
Okay, cool.
Well, I mean, David commented, I didn't read his comment in the chat, but I'm going to assume he agrees with me. How about that?
And that would make it a lot easier. I had seen a comment in here that there might be kind of a, if you're deleting, say, a whole set of resources that you can no longer decrypt, that you're going to have to do this repeatedly and you're going to end up relisting a lot. Is that a problem?
The relists will fail until all of the objects are successfully decryptable. So like clients won't be able to reestablish watches. They will just sit there like trying to list and failing with a decrypt error until the admin go, if you had multiple things that couldn't be decrypted, until they go and like clean up the things that need to be cleaned up. So it's tedious, but I don't think you're going to get things like establishing watches with great expense and then dropping them, and then establishing them at great expense, dropping them, maybe.
Okay.
We should validate that the admin whose job it is to delete the things can actually get the information they need to know the individual items they need to do, even if they have to do them one by one. As long as they can get the information and do the cleanup, that's really all I care about.
Yeah, one thing that I will also suggest is to, same like we do backup restore, is to on etcd side to mark all the old revisions are compacted or to move compaction. So that's to disencourage all the clients to open a watch or open a dual list on all the revisions. Just give them information. Hey, you should, like, everything before this point of view is not available. Like, please skip.
Are you saying this has the same effect? Like the deletion drops the watch and forces them to...
I mean, you lose, like, I mean, for my current assumption is we want to maintain struct consistency. You need to have complete history, and to have complete history, or if you have a gap, something corrupted, you have a gap. And same like backup restore, if you don't, you're not sure about what happened in the gap, better mark it as not available.
So usually what happens in this gap is that someone tinkers with the key configuration, which is not optimal. What I've also seen in the right is that a backup went horribly wrong, where the snapshot is from some moment in time, and afterwards there's some data with different keys. Yeah, so it's not easy to create, but it happens.
Yeah, as long as there's a path to clean up, and clients that are watching don't get left in bad intermediate states, I don't really care if it performs super well.
Okay, so let me summarize. We don't need to tinker with this, and we are fine with a cache reset, even if there are a couple of those clients poking at the door of the Kube API server, and maybe I should look into the compact of etcd. Yes, no?
The feedback I heard was we need to make sure it's possible to get a listing of all the resources you need to remove. and yeah, the compaction thing that Merrick mentioned.
This is actually a feature already, like in Alpha, where we list like the first 100 cropped objects, because currently you only get one and then we are out. But now we will be able to get 100 of them up to.
Okay.
Okay.
Joe, do you have thoughts around testing for beta as well? Things like integration tests that actually corrupt the data in etcd, ensure that the flow for identifying these is correct, ensure the delete works, and ensure that the watch string functions correctly for client?
Yeah, I do think listing out the tests are really important here. So clearly showing that we can do the things we expect people to be able to do, like the user stories. Let's make sure we articulate those and then back those up with EDE tests. So the ability to say, oh, I know like a resource or a collection of resources is now undecryptable. We have a way to set them up that way in etcd, and then we have a way to verify that we can actually list them out, remove them all, and that at the end any watchers do converge to watching again in a successful way, I think.
So we have currently one integration test, but I think it's just one use case, and it had me allowed to go through the logs to see their behavior. So what we do is we change ad hoc the key configuration and have them cropped object, but we could try to extend the test cases.
Yeah, I can volunteer to help review the list of test cases we want to cover. I think backing it up by the user stories that we need to support is important. I'm trying to think if there's any special resources we need to make sure we cover, or if we just need to pick some random resources. I think at least one built-in and one CRD seems appropriate. But David or Jordan, do you have any particular resources we need to be absolutely sure work?
Those, yeah, that combination sounds like a good start. I mean, if we find more, okay, I can't think of one right off though.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like infrastructure that's super dependent on the contents because you can't see it anyways. But okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's make sure we have the good set of user stories. Are there different states of kind of undecryptable that a resource can be in storage? I mean, there's we have encryption at storage, so that's just the decryption. We also have the potential of like an unreadable resource at storage. Are we trying to cover that as well, or is that totally separate?
Only by name so far. So I could check if we can add more tests on that. Because the enhancement started with a focus on undecryptable resources, but when Abo picked it up, he changed it to corrupt objects, which seems like there's also a use case for this.
Yeah, that seems like something that might be relatively low effort, but it might come out as a different error in places in the stack. So we might have to test it and make sure we cover that code path special.
Yeah, doing a bit flip in the integration test. I would at least try it. Maybe it just works. I think it probably might, but we'll find out.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool, amazing. So thank you a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I did put it in the chat, but I am transcribing this call and then I will summarize based on this and add to the notes if something was missing on the next steps. But hopefully you got what you needed to move forward for now, and then you will come back with your family. Thank you, Christoph, and everybody.
Yes,
Okay,
definitely. And there are 3 pull requests already open, which I would really ask someone to please review. Thank you a lot. Exactly, there are the links. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, Joe, you are next here.
Great. Yeah, so this is an old idea. I'd circulated a doc with a few people, and I just wanted to expand the group that doc is available to. Anybody that's on the dev at Kubernetes.io mailing list should be able to access this doc. There's a link to it there. The proposal here is basically to make it possible to configure what today we call dynamic admission controls. So that's validating admission webhooks, mutating admission webhooks, validating admission policies, mutating admission policies. All four of those would be able to set that up as configuration input into the API server as a file, right? So when you start the API server, you give it a flat file that says, I want to define this webhook. You do that as a cluster administrator, and that webhook is guaranteed to be on active by the time that your cluster is accepting requests. And the only way you can change it is by changing that file. So it'd be a different way of doing this. There's a bunch of details in this. If you're interested, please read it over. Mostly, I just wanted to make sure there's appetite in the community for this because we're looking for contributors to start working on something to open a cup for 136 if there are no major concerns directionally with it. That's it. Any questions about that?
I will point out that the agenda item we skipped up at the top actually would be addressed by this. The image policy webhook, there was a question like, can we just get rid of this in favor of admission webhooks? And one of the things that image policy webhook does that admission webhooks don't currently do is it's in place from cluster start, configured by the admin. And so being able to set up webhooks effective from start, configured by the admin, would maybe give us a path to like deprecating some of the alpha ones that were compiled in.
Good catch. I'll actually bring that into the doc and make sure we call that out specifically in the cup.
I just had one thing to add to the summary you gave, Joe. It's that the fact that it's file-based means that we are not allowing it to reference and use resources inside the cluster.
Yes.
And I think that's a very important detail for people who are like hearing this or not really going to read it carefully. That means you can't like reference other parameters from inside the cluster, as I recall it. Correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Basically what we're saying is the universe of resources of this file-based system is its own universe. It doesn't see or interact with the actual API resources that you usually see. So you can't have any interrelationship between those. And that does create some constraints because admission policies do have a lot of ability to look at params that you set up in your cluster to do things. You wouldn't be able to do that through this.
Great. I think that's a very reasonable restriction and actually is useful because it helps predictability, but just want to be sure. Great.
Yeah, it does affect portability. You wouldn't just be able to one-for-one take some of these resources you see online and bring them in as a file-based one and have them work. And we would need to make sure that we have some good checks that tell you exactly what you did wrong in those cases.
And that's similar to how something like static pods behave. The kubelet can be pointed at a folder full of pod manifests and just run them. And those aren't allowed to reference API things. So if you have a static pod manifest, it can't point at a service account or CSI volumes or things that need the API because it has to be sort of this self-contained block. There was a question from Lumir.
So those aren't actually loaded. These are not going to be loaded into the API server. So that makes it different. So instead of being able to like access and see what was created or forced, there is no way for a cluster admin on this cluster who doesn't have access to the command line or the machine that has launched the API server to even know that these are in effect, to know that they're set, to know what their values are, their names, or what they're doing.
Yeah, so this is similar to the flag configured, like turn on this compiled and admission plugin. Like it doesn't show up as an API object.
Yeah. I do think when we write the KEP, it's worth explaining both the good and the bad that this you cannot reference brings with it. Portability is one negative. Another negative is you can't do some things like quota, where you can't have an admission policy that is built that can be triggered by someone putting something in a namespace. I think that's a fair trade-off to make, but we should explicitly indicate it so people know it's not an accident.
Yeah, I agree. It's also worth pointing out that webhooks today are relatively opaque. You can write a webhook binary, and you don't give anybody access to see how that binary works. It's kind of your own thing. So today, webhooks are already a little bit opaque, or at least you can make them opaque. Whereas admission policies are very transparent, right? If you have, if it's in the cluster, people in the cluster can read it. Whereas this is going to make it possible to make it for really opaque policies as well, which may be a feature if that's what you want.
Yes, Merrick. If these things prevent writes, then yes, their names show up in the error. So part of the KEP will be describing how that surfaces. Like, how do they show up in ways that are sensible to users, or as sensible as we can make them?
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. We'll be sending a KEP out at some point. If anybody's interested in contributing or learning more, please hop on the Slack channel or come talk to me, or I'll try and redirect to the right people. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. That was great. Okay, let's continue with our list of items. Ricardo, are you in the call or?
Yeah, I am. So I'm gonna try to time box myself in 5 minutes. So I'm Ricardo. I work at Red Hat. I'm mostly nowadays on gateway API stuff. Long story short, we found that there are some cases where we want to avoid 2 users on different namespaces to have the same field on the same resource. And block them of doing that. And then while discussing with some other contributors and some other folks internally at Red Hat, we were wondering like, hey, maybe can we use a VEP or something like that that would query, other objects on other namespaces as a parameter reference, because it is already kind of allowed to do that on the same namespace, and how this would look like. Then I just decided to to take a peek on that and see if it would work or not, without any concern on performance or why those things they would happen or not. I know that Jordan is laughing on that because I want to make it really clear. Like I was just doing some proof of concept on that and trying to understand how far I could push into that idea, right? And honestly, I don't know how all of those things they work inside API Machinery, so that's why I brought that to you. So basically, my idea was like, okay, this would work, but what kind of concerns we would have, right? So like, is this doable or not? Based on some discussions, people told me like, yeah, we don't want to do that, but I couldn't find aware saying like why we wouldn't want to do that, right? So the gap wasn't clear on like cross namespaces or other things. So I was like, okay, maybe I can just bring that, try to see how complex the implementation would be, and see if we are willing to or not to do that. So mostly that's what I've been doing here. And yeah, I'm happy to discuss that. And by the way, Jordan and David, they already jumped into the issue before this meeting, but it was already on my agenda, so I decided to bring that anyway. So sorry, folks. That's all.
I can give a little. I haven't read all the comments on the thread yet, but a little bit of the background here is that when we introduced Cell and the policy systems that we built using it, one of the things that we cared a lot about was the performance and the predictability of the performance. So one property the system has right now is if you load a policy, maybe from the third-party ecosystem, you didn't author it, you can trust that that is going to be very bounded in its performance costs for your cluster. We do that by bounding the cell execution costs really tightly. And then we do that by preloading in the controller all the resources that get used. So today, there is no like side calls to reload additional resources. Everything's being watched by the controllers. And then as things come in, there's no need to make additional resource lookup calls, which really helps with that performance predictability goal. So that's kind of the background of why you see that the system built the way it is.
There were two particular bits of feedback. One was just the scale of the number of param objects selected. The goal is really to have as few evaluations of these policies as possible. And so the way the system is set up, you can have it evaluate multiple times, but like trying to have every right of a type evaluate as many times as there are instances of that type anywhere in the cluster is that is not the type of scale approach we contemplate. So, I mean, the structure of the bindings push you in the direction of like identifying a particular instance of a param. So one evaluation or a selector, but within the same namespace or within a single namespace. So yeah, the goal is few, ideally one evaluation of the policy per binding. So that's just sort of a general comment on the scale. Specifically for your use case where you're trying to keep unique uses of a value in a field across different objects or across different namespaces. Even if we could get the scale working at admission time, that's not a reliable place to enforce that because two requests can be written concurrently. So two requests can both arrive, both trying to use the same value in a field, both hit admission at the same time, nothing's been persisted yet, and they could both be approved by admission and both get persisted. And so you have to have some, after the fact, linearizable view to decide, all right, who actually got this value. And so if you're going to have that anyway, it's just way more performant to make that the normal path. David has a hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, both you and I did one of the original implementations to do this for hostname assignment on routes.
Yep.
And as I recall, the way that we did that was with a leader elected component that ended up selecting a winner, writing a result into status, and going one by one.
Yep.
And that solution has held for 11 years.
Yeah.
So you might want to look at doing a thing like that.
Okay, yeah, I can take a look into that. My so just clarifying that the problem of the concurrent writes today, it does exist anyway, right, Jordan? Like it's just like the scale would be worse if we do a namespace wide selection, right? Like you can get more of that problem.
Sure. Yeah, like the scale of doing namespace wide or cluster wide evaluations as part of admission is just problematic. That's a problematic scale.
Okay.
Even if you could solve that scale problem, you would still have concurrent write problems. So it wouldn't be an effective guard against two things both claiming the same name. Or not
Okay.
name, same host name.
Yeah, that's a generic field, but that's okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I will take a look into that. I just wanted to bring that anyway and see like what was the background of not allowing the cross namespace selection anyway. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Ricardo, Jordan, David, Joe. Okay, let's move to the next one. Michael, I see you on the call.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Yeah, so this comes from, I think, presented like maybe a couple weeks back at the other SIG API Machinery meeting. Basically, this is mostly to do with like adding like certain guarantees to informers, those kind of things. Last time we were mostly looking at the actual informer being able to like read their own rights, those kind of things. The issue that we came into was that we noticed that in client Ghost, some of the parts that storage, like the storage layer of client Go isn't necessarily consistent with whatever is in the API server, especially on replace events and those kind of things. So the main issue that we found was that when a replace event happens, it sends out like a bunch of updates, it sends out a bunch of create events and those things, rather than doing this atomically. So what we're proposing is to instead of having this processing take place inside of the FIFO where it could slow down, it has to actually access the storage. We can move that out into the process loop. This whole document goes through like the actual like implementation details of it. But basically, we want to move that processing out of the FIFO so we don't have to lock on the storage. We want to add a new delta type for the atomic operation, which passes a list of all the different objects that the replace event does. And this would help make it so that the storage would reflect the real world. Yeah, David.
And just so we're clear on what the real world is, you said it's not the same as the API server. I would maintain it's never the same as the API server. I think what may be more precise, if I'm understanding it correctly, is the storage or the listers or the notifications reflect a state that never existed on the API server.
Exactly. And this is already
replacing that.
And this is already a problem. So like if you do a replace call right now with either like the Delta FIFO or the real FIFO, what happens is that you pass in all those events and they could be out of order in terms of like the resource version, those kind of things. So you get these intermediate states in storage that don't ever really exist in some like real world scenario.
Okay. And so playing those in order would be possible.
Yeah.
Because we now have said that we can sort them all.
So you still so a relist will give you a bunch of items that have individual resource versions, but a relist doesn't give you all of the intermediate updates that led to that snapshot. And so even if you played the events into the store in order of their resource version, you would still get a bunch of intermediate states that don't necessarily correspond to any actual resource version.
Okay.
Yeah, and storage's interface already has the replace thing. It's just that it's never actually used, I don't think, in most cases. I think there's only like one or two places which actually use it, but at least in the processing phase of it, it's always a create, update, like delete. It seems like a pretty logical way to do it would just to use that replace on itself.
So that would accomplish three things. One, it would get rid of a lot of lock contention if we could just plumb the whole set of objects. Like, here is the current state. Please stick it into the store, instead of breaking it apart into a bunch of updates and then grabbing locks. And so it gets rid of lock contention, but that's not the primary thing I care about. Making the store consistent means anytime anyone asks for stuff from the store, like from a lister or from, I guess from a lister usually.
Yeah, and this was the
problem. What they get back is actually like a set of stuff that existed at a point in time at a given resource version. And then more interestingly, you could also ask a store, what resource version are you current as of? Like, what resource version are you up to? And that, because we've decided resource versions within a type are comparable, would make it really easy for a controller to do things like say, is my pod store at least up to date from the last pod I wrote for this daemon set? And if not, requeue my daemon set, come back later, try again.
Yeah, David?
So it's been a minute, but as I recall, the handling for controllers was done where the notification from the informer to the controller was done under the lock. That notification happened and it was queued into a work queue. The lock was released, and then at some later point in time, a lister was used to pull a potentially different level of the data out of the cache. Is all the stuff described here going to keep those rough semantics where the notification is going to get queued, the queue will be dequeued, and you will get a cache result that may bear no relationship to the thing that you got queued for?
Yeah,
that would be fine
that
with
should.
me. I'd be happy. I'd love that. But I just want to make sure that's what is actually being planned.
Yeah, so it keeps the same semantics. We actually do have like tests to that we're adding to make sure like all the events that get queued and all this stuff like the underlying storage, the events that get queued are going to be identical between the two. But the only difference should be the storage semantics in the sense of that we won't have these intermediate events, but otherwise the semantics that we actually send off to the controllers and all that kind of stuff shouldn't change at all.
Okay, so when doing the replace, we will still get a notification for an update notification for every item that was different between what was previously in the cache and what we're replacing it with.
Exactly, yeah. We're just pulling
Okay.
that out of the FIFO. The FIFO shouldn't need to access storage. That makes it so that we get like a double lock on the FIFO and the store. We move that into the process loop. So the only thing that needs to use is the storage at that point, but it's not having any contention on the FIFO lock at that point in time. So it's just moving where exactly we send the events out, but the semantics are going to be the same.
So there was a property in that flow that I think we ensured. Wow, this is going back some years ago. I seem to recall that we always updated the store based on the reflector before we called the other what were they called? They weren't watchers, but the other things that registered to receive notifications.
Handlers.
Handlers, yeah. Is that flow going to remain where the underlying store will be updated first, and then we will get the notification?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
that property was really important. It made sure that even though the cache data you got may be more recent, it was never older.
Yes.
Yeah. So rather than doing like the create, update, delete and sending out the notifications, now we're just doing one full replace and sending out the batch of notifications after that. So the storage is going to be the exact same in terms of like per object. The only thing is that now we're doing the batch replace and then updates. Like all the events getting sent out after that replace.
Okay.
Yep. And the prop that has the nice property of if in one of those individual event handlers, it for some reason introspected like the whole store, today it would, only the items in the list that had been processed up to that point would be reflected in the store. And now, if you get a list and as a result you get 10 adds and 10 deletes and 10 updates, all of those handlers, whenever they inspect the store would reflect all the things that had been observed as part of that relist and replace already.
Yeah, the only concern that we had is that it's on this like page right there. The process loop before was bounded because it was only going to be one object that was ever going to be processed. Like one of those deltas contains one object, it updates the store somehow. Now we're doing this processing on an indefinite amount of objects because a replace could have and many objects. So that's the only concern. The processing is basically just being amortized. It's getting moved from the FIFO queue to the process loop, which I think is better because that means that we're not doing this processing under the lock or anything like that. But it technically does change the guarantees of the process loop. That the process loop before was very time bounded with one object, but now we have this possible like and many objects.
I look forward to discovering everywhere where that matters.
No. But regardless, we're going to be adding this as a feature gate, so it's going to be rollbackable and all that stuff. But
I was actually going to ask, how practical is it? Have you tried? Because sometimes something this deep is actually really hard to add behind a gate. Looks like you have some scars. Okay.
Because it's basically taking the logic to break apart a list into a bunch of things, and it's shifting where that happens. It's actually pretty straightforward. Like if we enable this, we say, oh, we're replacing. Great. New delta type with the information we need, just ship it down to this new logic. And so it's pretty decent.
Yeah.
I look forward to blocking off a week for reviewing and working through this. One thing Michael mentioned was some of the properties that we need from the layers we have today, like slow readers not blocking other readers, and like happens before relationships, where the store is updated before the handler gets called. Some of those, this is a good opportunity to add tests specifically for those properties, to make sure that whatever we do here doesn't change those properties. And in some cases, I'm not even sure we had very focused tests for those.
Yeah, there's a prerequisite like PR before this one that just adds some tests to check these guarantees. So we're adding those as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Did we exhaust this topic for now?
Yep.
Hopefully you got what you need. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, trying to be mindful of that. We have 2 more topics we want to get through before the end of today. Marek?
Yeah, just quickly touching on a PR that was stuck in 135 related to monitoring of the client Go, so in the related area. High level, I think there was a long-standing cap for that. It was just didn't move. High level, we want to, or before adding a metric to the client Go, we need to solve one issue, and I would like to have alignment on that. So the main difference between like metrics and logs and other stuff is identity. The problem is it's pretty hard to or from monitoring point of view, if you're serving a metric, you want to be sure which queue, which informer, which object this queue is handling, and there is currently no way to know, no way to combine which queue matches which informer and which reflector. So if you expose like the previous attempt exposed the metric as just based on code path. So happy you have consistent code paths and they don't change in the Kubernetes repo, even though they're auto-generated. So my idea would be, could we have an identity structure that we can pass through the call stack that can be optional by the caller? That I know when creating an informer or informer factory, they can pass the option with to name the informer, and that will be passed to all the structures created below that expose metrics, and then use this identity. The only constraint on the structure would be good that it maintains the guarantee that it's unique, so that we don't. By mistake, someone doesn't name 2 informers with the same name and then have problems. So we want to constrain that. But aside of that, the behavior would, if someone doesn't name the resource, we could just disable the metric. So there is like high-level proposal of why we would, how the structure could look like. Here we're talking about like separating the name that is given by the user to the item type. So whether FIFO processes pods or secrets or config maps. And other than that, just have this identity to be used for not only metrics, but have a like basically correlation. So have if this name is provided, we could not only use it for metrics, we could make it used in logs or traces, and those could be always generated, even if the name is not unique, because like logs and traces, like it's up. If someone didn't name the structure, it's up. Like that's their problem. But if we if we did that, then you could easily like match the things. And there, I think we have a case or duplicate, or I don't remember. There is a case of duplicate in the currently in how we set up informers, but I would need to confirm, double check that. Yeah, so the identity is just like pushing a consistent identity so that we can get better observability, guarantee that there is no collisions of the names, and we have nice names instead of having a code path. So I give an example at the end how the metrics could look like an example FIFO metric. So I would want to, I have a PR that proposes the identity structure and handling of single metric, and we could start with that. I think that's high level. Wanted to introduce the concept and whether it makes sense or there are other ideas how we could do that. Yeah, David?
So casting my mind back to previous attempts to do this, the call path did result in really high cardinality, as I recall. The other spot where this broke, if I remember correctly, was on the kubelet, where we launched a reflector for every pod that ever existed, and then we never cleaned them up, if I'm remembering it correctly. So we ended up with like super high cardinality on some metrics. How are we going to address the reflector identity? Like what would we do there in the kubelet for the reflectors created for the secret and config
map? I gave it constraint that the identity should should guarantee that if someone reserves a name, they are given the name, so that we don't have random numbers or random suffixes. And second, if you're reserving an identity that is already used, you should get an error. So either kubelet would give up, or all other reflectors would not have a metric because they would not be unique.
My starting point for the dynamic, unbounded reflectors that kubelet creates is that those wouldn't publish these metrics, at least until we figure out.
Are we going to have something in an E2E test that tries to figure out how many we had? Do we already have that? We've had several issues in the past for cardinality.
Yeah.
And it was very easy to have an accident that was fine at the scale of an E2E test and not so fine at the scale of a production cluster.
I mean, this seems to map to what we do with metrics for work queues. Like I think we had a almost identical thing where we were trying to generate like identities for work queues so we could publish metrics on them, and we ended up ripping all of that out. And we have, when you create a work queue, you can give it a name, and it needs to just be like the name of this controller's work queue is bootstrap signer queue, and it's a string, and you don't put random numbers at the end. You don't generate like matching that approach when you make an informer, like give it a name, don't generate it, don't put random stuff at the end. That seems like a decent starting point. And if you can't fit your constructor into that, like the kubelet auto-generated unbounded ones, it's like, well, you don't get metrics for now.
Okay, so our plan is to catch it and review.
No, the runtime will avoid just like all those other reflectors will not get a metric, or they will or kubelet get an error when constructing the metric and will abort.
It can prevent duplicates, and it can prevent publishing metrics if you're not given a name. It can't prevent someone doing something clever and appending a random digit to their name. So that should get caught in review.
All right.
Great.
I shared a link in chat, Merrick, that Patrick he'd sent me a review, and it's loosely related because he was starting to add names to parts of the client infrastructure, like informers and things for the purposes of logging. So it's not exactly the same end goal, but might overlap with what you're needing to do. So might be a good thing to look at.
Yeah, I think I shared with Patrick. So yeah, we are from same structured logging, so we can coordinate there. Yeah. Okay. Don't want to take more time. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have 3 more minutes. See you and for you on the last topic.
So this one will be quick. So I just want to remind everyone that in 135 we have added the main compatibility version for feature gates. So it provides a fast track to introduce a feature and go directly to beta instead of having to go through alpha for data compatibility reasons. So if you have some simple feature that you expect to be very stable, so you don't need to iterate on it, you should consider using main compatibility version, and then you can go directly to beta. So that's it. So in 136, you have some features that can be tested with the main command version. That would be great.
Okay. Any questions? Jordan, you have a hand.
Lest anyone get any super creative ideas, this is primarily for features where we're using the feature gate mechanism as a way to control rollout. But this is more under the list of like bug fix features where we have a change we're making and we're rolling it out using a feature gate mechanism. And the only reason we wouldn't default it on in the first revision is for like compatibility with the skewed older API server. That's primarily what we're envisioning people using this for. Using it for like actually net new features, there will be a few examples of that, but not many probably.
Gonna want to make sure that's in the messaging because everyone's feature is stable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have made it.
Right. It's wafer thin.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Very good. And we are almost at time and we completed our agenda. A little bit running, but thank you everybody for helping go quicker through the topics. I will compile the notes and the transcript. We'll add to the document. I will upload the recording later today. This is our last meeting of the year, so if we don't see each other, I wish everybody has some time to refresh and rest and happy holidays. And we will be back here on January 7th, if everything goes fine. Thank you for a great 2025 and see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.